last video in this series on emotional intelligence. Now, by now we've gone through quite a few videos and quite a few different elements of emotions and emotional intelligence. The first video we talked about the basics of emotions and how emotions, they're everywhere in the workplace, and certainly as leaders we need to be aware of that. In video 2 we talked about, we got more into the foundations of, what is an emotion, how do emotions work. We focused a lot on our own emotions, so our own emotional vocabulary, what would we do when we feel a particular emotions. And in the third video, which was a TED Talk, we talked about emotional courage and talked a little bit more about some of the stuff that we did in the second video. Now in this last video, we're going to turn our attention to relationships. So being able to manage our own emotions, especially when we're in some sort of relationship, whether it be a work relationship or a personal relationship, and also looking at other people's emotions as well. So firstly, I want to get you thinking about your emotions and mastering your emotions. So, have you ever had a time where you've done something stupid because you got emotional? Of course you have. We've all done this. We've all been at a place where we've overreacted, we've been too angry and therefore, maybe yelled at somebody we shouldn't have, or, we've been too caught up in our enthusiasm or passion or lust for something and maybe, done something we again regret in the future. We've all been at a place where our emotions have given us, have made us do something that we shouldn't have done. Sometimes, however, it's not so much the emotion, but the avoidance of the emotion, right? So sometimes, maybe we should have had a conversation, but we didn't want to deal with the negative emotions. We didn't want to deal with the difficult situation. And that's actually only made it worse. So it's really important that we're aware that bad emotions are not always bad. Sometimes we should actually experience them and deal with them. Good emotions are not always good. Yeah, so we've talked about that in the last couple of videos, but it's always good to keep that at the forefront of your mind. Emotions are emotions. We talk about them as being positive or negative. They're not necessarily good or bad at any point in time. They all serve a purpose. So one of the things we need to think about is things that we can do when it comes to emotions. So when we feel emotional, remember to breathe. Oh, excuse me. Oh, I'm starting to feel difficult. Sorry, I'm just choking a bit of food. Remember to breathe. And then go and do something. So sometimes we feel upset about something, or somebody's asked us to do something, we feel quite upset or angry or negative. Sometimes we just need to breathe, count to 10, just slow things down, and then get on and do with it. Sometimes, and we'll talk about this in a few weeks, sometimes the fear or the negative emotion is actually worse than just doing the thing that we're fearful of, if you know what I mean. All right, so remember to breathe when you get emotion, count to 10. Sometimes it's good to sleep on it. So sometimes you get an email or you get a message from somebody, or you find out about somebody and something happening and you get very emotional. Sometimes it's better to just sleep on it, just give it some time before you actually openly react. Connected to that, you can create an emotions versus reasons list. So your emotions will tell you certain things, but the reasons might be different. So a good example is you meet somebody you really like, your emotions will say, based on my emotion, I should go out with them. But then if you think about it in a rational way, you may have other reasons why you shouldn't go out with them. Now, one thing I want to say in advance is, we are emotional beings and emotions are important. So it's not that necessarily that rational cognitive thoughts supersede emotions, but we just need to weigh them up. So I'll give you a good example. If we're all very rational, none of us would probably buy a car which has, red paint or extra nice painting. Why? Because the extra paint may cost you more money for the car, but it actually doesn't add to, it doesn't make the car go faster, it doesn't make the car any safer. Just on a purely rational level, there's no real reason to buy a car that has a nice paint job, unless you're a model or you use it for part of your work, taking photo shoots. And yet, on another level, it's important to have things like a car, or something which is attractive. We talked about our motivations and our VIA strengths, and things like appreciation and beauty are important. So emotions are important, and when you create emotions versus reasons list, it's not that reasons will always trump emotions, but it's good just to slow yourself down. Other things you can do when you feel emotional: speak to somebody who's not emotionally involved. or invested in the problem. So somebody who, it doesn't matter which way you decide, but, they don't really care so much, but they care about you, and talking to them is helpful. Last couple of things is that you need to accept that you feel certain emotions. Sometimes you just don't like it, and that's okay. Right? You can not like something and still do it. Yeah. Also that. So some of the times, as I said before, like we don't like study or we don't like studying a subject. We don't feel good, so we avoid it. Sometimes it's better to say, yeah, I don't like studying this subject, but I'm just going to do it. And that is actually better than trying to avoid it and try to avoid those negative emotions that are associated with it. Finally, another important thing is that to accept that change may come. You may feel bad about something, but that doesn't mean you won't feel good about it in the future. I don't know whether you've had the experience where you do something and you're like, oh, I don't think I'm going to like this. And then after a while, you're like, hey, this ain't too bad, I can do this. Alternatively, the other way around, you may think this is really great, but just know that, it may not always be great as well. So there's some things you can do when you are feeling a lot of emotions. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is going to get you to do another activity. So this is a social awareness and perception of other emotions activity. So it's really important we can tell what other people are feeling. I don't know whether you've ever had that situation where you see someone, you talk to somebody, and you don't really perceive what they're feeling. So maybe you see them and they're just about to cry, and you just launch into whatever you want to talk about, and then you realize later on that you've actually made their situation worse. Or, at the very least, you've just sort of ignored them and made them not feel cared for. So it's important that we are aware of how other people are feeling, and we can often see this in their facial expressions. So I'm going to get you to do an exercise. I'm going to show you a whole pile of images, and I want you to work out what they are. So very quickly, again, get out a pen and paper, or get a notepad, Microsoft Word or Notepad, and we're going to do some emotions. Okay, so pictures 1 and 2, A and B. I'm going to give you 10 seconds on each. Picture A, 1, 2, 3. Okay, picture B. Look at picture B. Okay, what is picture B? What emotion? Pictures C and D. Okay, got them done. Next one. Pictures E and F. Okay, don't cheat, don't pause it. Just very quickly, what are these things? G and H. Okay, getting a bit hard now. I guess it doesn't have letters here, but let's call this I and J. I and J, same person, different emotions. Next two, K and L. Got it. M and N. Alrighty, so we got all these emotions. Let's quickly go back and see how you went with them. So, A and B. What's A? What does A look like to you? A is the emotion of fear. B is some sort of positive emotion like happy or joy, most likely just general happiness or contentment. C and D. What's C to you? C is anger. D is a little bit tricky. Some people say bashful, and bashful is another word for embarrassment, and if you said embarrassment, you'd be correct. E and F. What's E? E is a tricky one. E is pride, pride, yeah. And F is contempt. So not content as in happy, but contempt as in very sort of angry, disgusted, CONTEMPT, contempt. Next two, G is disgust, and H is love. Yeah, H is love. I and J. I is a tricky one, a little bit. I is contemptuous again, contempt. And J, the one on the right, this is a bit of a trick. This is like no emotion at all, neutral. K and L. The one on the left is disgust, and the one on the right is again contemptuous. M and N. M is broadly sad, so the one on the left is broadly sad or upset, and N is angry. Okay, got it? How'd you go with all those? How'd you go with all those faces? Again, when you think about how you rated yourself very early on, like around the pre-class activity, were you really good? Were you the mentalist, or were you not very good with emotions? Now you've got another thing you can score yourself on in terms of how emotionally intelligent you are. So you've got the, remember, you've got the first activity, which is how many emotions you can name. Then you have the activity about, what should you do with that angry person, and understanding that his anger was maybe a sign that he was being harmed. So understanding emotions. Here we have another activity, which is, can you detect the emotions? Here it's pretty quick, to be honest. So it's pretty slow, to be honest. Normally, oftentimes when you see emotions, they might be a lot faster and dynamic, as in somebody might show an emotion and then change to something else. So again, I mentioned in one of the earlier videos, the TV show Lie to Me. In Lie to Me, they look at micro expressions. So think about it this way: you're talking to somebody and they're angry, but they don't want to show that they're angry. For a split second, you might see the anger, and then you don't. That just makes it harder. Okay, so things you can do to help improve your emotional intelligence in terms of seeing other people's emotions, especially if you're not so good at it. Watch other people's body language. Just spend time watching them and looking at them more carefully. Think about when you do this, test for accuracy. So you can actually ask people, how are you feeling? And see whether it matches how you think they're feeling. Or you can actually say, are you feeling upset or angry, or whatever it is that you think you're. Other things you can do to help improve your social awareness and social perception. Greet people by their name. That's very useful. Think about the timing of your questions. Sometimes you might have a very good question or comment to make, but you need to make sure that they're in the right place. So again, think about when you were a kid, you knew that sometimes if you ask your parents and they're in a good mood, they're more likely to give it to you. Sometimes if they're in a bad mood, they're more likely not to give it to you. So it's important to think about, what is the other person thinking at this point in time? If your boss is stressed, when is the best time to ask them about, getting that raise or getting whatever it is that you want? Yeah, you need to be thinking about these things. So we want to be practicing our social awareness. We want to be practicing by looking at other people, practicing our listening. Some of us are naturally people who like to talk a lot. I am, and I know that from your reflections, some of you are. Sometimes it's important just to be quiet and just listen, right? As much as you can, try doing that, especially if you're noisy. Try just listening to what other people say. At first point, if you're a noisy person, some people might actually say, "Are you okay?" But it's just a good thing to do, just to observe what's happening. So there's some things you can do to improve your social awareness and emotional intelligence in that area. Okay, so a couple of things you need to know. So firstly, emotions are social information. So just as emotions help you understand things, so remember the bear or the snake idea, the emotion is telling you better run away from the bear or the snake. Emotions also tell other people things. So again, remember the video with the angry man. When he was angry, it was actually showing that he was passionate about something, or he had felt harm. So we need to remember that the emotions people show actually send us social information, and and we should basically act based on not only what they say, but also their social information. Now, one thing that most of us, well, many of us struggle with, myself included, is silence. If you're like me, you like talking, silence is difficult. And yet silence is important, especially in leadership. Sometimes people just need to stop and think. If you're like me, when somebody's silent, you naturally feel like you have to fill the void, you have to say something. That's not necessarily helpful. It doesn't help you to listen, and it may not allow them time to think a little bit more about their thing. So one thing when we talk about social awareness is to be aware that silence is actually quite useful. And again, this is something you can practice, especially when we all get out of COVID-19 isolation thing. Just spend a bit more time being a little bit silent and waiting for other people to say things, or just allowing time to pass. That's very helpful. Okay, so we've looked at how to perceive other people's emotions. What about using your own emotions? Do you use your emotions? Now, you may not think about it, but most of us probably do use our emotions in some way, shape, or form. So think about when you listen to music. Yeah, some of us listen to music at different times. So if you're going to go and play some big sport, oftentimes we use loud music to pump ourselves up, to G ourselves up. Yeah, or sometimes we use music to quieten ourselves down there, just to help us relax a bit. right? We can do this also by just, going out to, I guess if you're in Canberra, you might be able to hopefully be able to go out to Lake Ginninderra or Lake Burley Griffin or one of the other lakes just to calm ourselves down and relax. There is also a line of thinking that your facial expressions can actually change how you feel. So Ekman and Friesen have done some work on facial feedback theory. Now, to be honest, the research on this is really up and down. Some people think it works, some people think it doesn't work. But this is the idea that if you smile, like if you just put on a smile, eventually it'll make you feel happy. Maybe you should try it if you want. So you see this lady with a pencil in her mouth, and that's because that's the way you make yourself smile. What's called a Duchenne smile. It's a smile that is more genuine. You put a pencil in your mouth, and it forces your mouth into that smile. So as I said before, some research has shown that doing that can actually make you feel more happy. When we're looking at how to change the way you're feeling, there are what we call emotion regulation strategies, and there's 2 or 3 broad emotional regulation strategies that people use. The first is, and one of the more effective ones, is what we call attention redeployment. This is the Happy Gilmore idea. So if you've ever watched that movie Happy Gilmore has anger issues, and he's told to go to his happy place, right? When you feel angry, go to your happy place. Now, a lot of the research in things like regulation of emotions comes from customer service representatives and air hostesses. So when you think about air hostesses, it can be a stressful job. They've got to serve all the people food. People on a plane can be quite agitated, annoyed. They can react badly to you. So some research by Airlie Hochschild in 78 and 83 basically looked at what air hostesses did to help them deal with angry passengers. And one of the things they did was called attention redeployment. They thought about something else. So somebody's being angry with me, I can yell back at them, but I don't want to, or I don't think it's a good idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to think about something else. I'm going to go to my happy place. This is helpful when you want to manage your emotions. Maybe you need to go to your happy place. Another thing you could do is what we call cognitive appraisal, cognitive reappraisal. So this is thinking about the situation really differently. So again, think about if you're in customer service, you have people calling you and they're upset and they're yelling at you, they're getting angry at you. It's very stressful for you, and it's very easy for you to get rattled and maybe yell back at them, and you may not want to do that. So cognitive reappraisal is to think about the situation in a different way. So again, the customer may be yelling at you, but why are they yelling at you? So again, maybe you're out working at Woolies or Coles or somewhere during this COVID-19 situation, and you've got customers who are getting a bit upset with you or just stressed with you because just in general. Now it's easy for you to maybe snap back, but again, one thing you can do is just think about it differently and go, well, maybe the reason why this person is stressed is because they're desperate and they really have no toilet paper, or they need something and their child can only eat that particular food because the child has some sort of allergy or some sort of issue. So yeah, they're getting angry and grumpy, but it's not because they are upset, really angry with you per se. It's because they're just desperate for what they need. When you think about the situation that way, it might be a little bit easier for you to deal with them, to not snap back. So that's cognitive appraisal. It's also important to ask questions of why is somebody showing emotions. So again, your manager's angry with you or snaps at you, you might think, this is not fair, I'm going to snap back. But you need to remember that maybe they're angry and it's not even to do with them, it's to do with maybe there's something else happening around them that's stressing them out. Yep. And the last one is emotional suppression. So emotional suppression is just trying to force that emotion down. So you feel like yelling at somebody, you're just going to, David, don't yell. David, just calm down, don't yell. It's not a very good strategy. It does work, but it doesn't work as effectively as the other two. And you find that if you try and just sort of suppress that emotion, after a while you may not be able to do it. So there are 3 strategies you can use. My suggestion is to use cognitive appraisal and attention deployment. Cognitive appraisal is probably the best, and it also works well with something called motivational epistemology. Motivational epistemology is just a long way of saying, why is this person doing what they're doing? Trying to think about that before you react. So, why is this person being angry? And then when I understand that maybe it's not so unreasonable for them to be angry. And yeah, maybe they're a bit too angry at me than they should be, but it's easier for me to deal with it in that respect. All right, so things you can do again, right? So firstly, acknowledge other people's feelings, right? You may not agree with it. So somebody might be angry and you may not believe that's a good thing, but at least acknowledging it is important. So think about it this way, you know, when you've been angry or upset, you talk to somebody and the first thing they do is they almost talk as if you're not angry, right? Or if you're not being reasonable. So acknowledge other people's emotions, and this can help you slow things down, maybe slow them down too. Make sure you only get mad on purpose. So, as I said before, there are times where it's right to feel angry. You know, if you feel somebody is abusing somebody or doing something really bad, yeah, you should feel angry and mad. But there are times where it's not appropriate. So what you want to do is, if you are going to get mad, make sure it's an appropriate time and place. There's a good reason for it. So get mad on purpose. Where you can compliment people on their emotions, and show that you care. That's really important. Again, you may not agree with their emotion, but you can show that you care by acknowledging it and trying to deal respectfully with them. All right. Make your feedback direct and constructive, it should say, and offer a fix if you can. If during a broken conversation, if you can fix it, fix it. One of the most important things is to try and avoid broken signals. We've seen or mixed signals, should we say? We've seen again, in Australia anyway, with lots of this virus stuff, lots of mixed signals. It can create problems. So try and be straightforward, but gentle and respectful when you're being straightforward as well. Okay, so as we head off to, that pretty much brings us to the end of this particular video and this particular seminar section on emotions. Now that you've done all this, we've finished our first set of videos. Go to the discussion section on Waddle here on emotional intelligence. I'll keep it open until the Monday night of the next week for you to discuss things. Lots of questions you can answer there, and also a lot of things that we brought up during this class that you can also talk about as well. Feel free to ask questions. Feel free to respond to your classmates' replies. I'll be there. I'll be responding every now and then. Probably not to every single person, but I'll certainly be there. Also, if you have any questions, again, feel free to ask me. Other than that, I'll see you in our next video.